Welcome back, horror fans, cinephiles, and Giallo enthusiasts. This is Tanner Leeser, your host for The King in Giallo, and let's do another unscripted movie review. So this will be the first talking head movie review I do for a movie I'm covering for the Jolly Tally. I decided that this format would actually work pretty well for me to do I do reviews in the Jolly Tally, but it's after the movie's over and it's usually only like a couple minutes, so I figured this would give me a chance to talk much longer on it. I also used to do this when I did the viewings on Patreon. There's a little too much work sitting down in this studio space watching the movie for an hour and a half, trying to be interesting while I'm just like this. You know, I was like, I don't like doing these. I don't like editing. They take a long time to edit also. I'm not going to do these anymore. So I figured moving forward in the 2025 season onwards with the King and Giallo, when I say overview, review, Jolly Tally, I'm actually going to do the overview separately as I've been doing, but I'm not going to include it with the Jolly Tally. You just have to watch the overview and the Jolly Tally, but now the review is going to be its own thing. Onwards, I'm going to try really hard not to just sit here and ramble for a really long time. I do have some thoughts on this movie. I really like this movie, so it is My Dear Killer, 1972 by Tonino Antonio Valerii. I'm not too familiar with Italian names with a double I at the end, but I'm just going to say Valerii. Anyways, I saw this movie for the first time 2 years ago on Shudder. I'm assuming that what had happened was in order for Shudder to bolster its Giallo films, they were acquiring mostly Vinegar Syndrome Giallo films, because when I then looked into Vinegar Syndrome and I saw all these Forgotten Jolly box sets, all the movies that were in the box sets were coincidentally all the movies that were in Shudder's Giallo lineup, as well as other like big name ones that were, also being carried by Arrow and whatnot. But you'd have like Deep Red, Tenebrae, all these other big Giallo films, but then you also had all these ones that I'd never heard of. I will say this real quick, this isn't a review for this product, but I will just say this now. Okay, so this is Vinegar Syndrome's Forgotten Jolly box set volume 2. It comes with Girl in Room 2A, The French Sex Murders, and My Dear Killer. And I will say this, check it out. Buy this if you haven't, if you're a big Giallo fan or a Giallo completionist. It's not a bad thing to have. I will just say that I also watched Girl in Room 2A and The French Sex Murders 2 years ago, around the same time that I watched My Dear Killer, when I was just like, oh, there's like 6 or whatever Giallo films on Shudder that I've never seen. I should knock these out. Girl in Room 2A and The French Sex Murders, I remember not liking. Now, I will say I did watch My Dear Killer first, and I kind of had the Deep Red thing where you're just like, this is so good. And going into those movies, I was very less than impressed. I remember some things about Girl in Room 2A, which at least stood out to me. The French Sex Murders, I could not tell you a thing that happened in that movie. And to be fair, I probably was not paying attention. I probably was trying to watch too many movies within a given time, and I think my attention span was falling apart. But like I've said, the joke is on me, because because there is a Blu-ray that I own of these movies, I will be covering them in full. That's kind of one of the main determining factors of how do I do a Jolly Tally. Well, do I own it? I guess I'm going to cover it. But anyways, we're talking about My Dear Killer. Going through this movie, it stars George Hilton, which had totally gone past me when I first watched this, because it had been, when I got back into Giallo films, it had been several years since I was really watching them, because I went back to school and so it's just I had other things to focus on. But I didn't recognize George Hilton as someone that I'd seen in several movies. Anyways, so he plays an investigator, which is really interesting because he's always kind of playing this like, playboy type character, kind of like John Sorrell. And also like John Sorrell, he's always typecast as he's either this love interest guy or he's got a dark secret and, he's actually the killer type of thing. Well, at least in this one, that's not the case, because he's the inspector, which just because he's the inspector doesn't mean he couldn't be the killer, but he's very clearly never implied to be the killer. Anyways, but yeah, the movie also stars, so George Hilton also stars Salvo, Randone, Marilù, Tolo, William Berger, and Manuel Sarso. Music is also by Ennio Morricone, which Okay, so this brings up the first similarity. Brings up the first similarity to Argento. The music in this reminds me mostly of Morricone's soundtrack in The Bird with the Crystal Plumage. And then there's, I guess I'll just say it now, there is something that is a plot device which comes up at the very end of the movie that is very reminiscent of something that is done later in Deep Red. And I would argue it's actually better in this movie. But anyways, so, look at this. Some critics considered it one of the best films in the thriller genre, and as one of the best, most vibrant, and well-designed products of Italian Giallo. Yes, I absolutely stand by that. I remember watching this movie for the first time just thinking, how the hell had I never heard of this? There was a lot of Giallo movies that I'd heard of that I just had not gotten around to seeing, like Hatchet for the Honeymoon. There's still a bunch that I have that I haven't watched yet because I want to be able to watch them and talk about them for the channel. So I don't want to just watch all these movies and then wait, years to later talk about them. Maybe gives me a reason to justify doing some unscripted movie reviews for some of these movies a couple years ahead of when they will actually be covered on the channel. But anyways, I remember watching My Dear Killer just thinking, wow, I can't believe I've never even heard the title of this movie. Anyways, yeah, really, really, really enjoyed this movie. This is a very good investigation, and what's also great about it is it's not too bogged down in dialogue and talking scenes where you're just kind of sitting there like, okay, wait, hold on, wait, why are we talking to this person now? There is, to be fair, there is a lot of talking, but the scenes are all handled very well. And from the first scene with the first kill and the way it is shot, you're in good hands. Like, director speaking, that, okay, this guy knows what he's doing. Okay, what is this movie about? Movie opens on the side of this like swamp with that's kind of surrounded by like some cliffs, and this older looking guy in a suit, he's standing at the edge of the water, and there's this other guy who you don't see in an excavator, and he's like, all right, let's start dredging. And so, okay, so they're gonna start dredging the swamp. They're obviously looking for something. Well, whoever is operating the excavator maneuvers it so the giant like digging apparatus is right over this guy's head, and he brings it down and just clamps the guy, lifts him up, and this is actually an amazing effect. And I realized after rewatching it and at this moment, I was like, I really should have included this kill in the unique weapons, unique kills list I did. But again, I will do other lists. It will definitely be in there. But yeah, guy gets killed with an excavator, lifts him up, and he's literally hanging there. His arms are, great effect. So you could tell that they actually did some work into actually pulling this off. It wasn't just like a guy was holding onto this thing. Like there was clearly something keeping him up. But yeah, it lets him go, falls off, his head comes off, and then the police are brought in and are investigating. George Hilton is the lead detective here. They find out that whoever was operating the machine, they know who it is because the machine was rented from a company, and so they know who the driver was. Well, everybody else on site is assuming probably was an accident. The guy got scared and took off, and we don't know where he is. Well, then they find him, and he appears to have ended things himself. Again, I got to be careful how I word it. He's hanging up somewhere. He's hanging around, and they come in, and again, all the police are like, okay, again, just like the last one, this one seems like an open and shut case. He clearly was guilty. There's an empty bottle right down here. He's up here, and there's a giant drum that's like kicked over. So clearly he got up there, did his thing, and kicked the drum over. Okay, open and shut case. Well, George Hilton, who's what's his name? Luca Peretti. I'll just call him Luca. Luca lifts the drum up, and the guy's shoes are, his feet are like this, and with the drum up, they're like just barely touching the drum, which would imply that this guy had to set everything up like on his tippy toes and still some. And then he determines, well, the act of doing this would break up part of your spine and extend your height to about 2 or 3 centimeters. And this gets corroborated, like, yes, that's true. And he's like, okay, so if you take off 2-3 centimeters, there's no way this guy would actually have been able to do this, given the height difference of his feet with the head of the drum. Okay, so this is a murder. Okay, so they start looking into this as the murder. Luca goes, and there's a house on the top of the area with the swamp. there was a little house, a little like shed, a little cottage, really rundown looking place that's up there. And he goes in to question the person who lives in there. The guy was already talked to the police, but he's like, I want to talk to you. And what you find out from this guy and this woman, this older woman, that the guy kind of like, I guess he's, you know, this woman used to be married, but that husband died, and this guy has been, I guess, hooking up with her or whatever. He lives up there. He likes the place. He says people routinely will come and just throw stuff out in the pit, and he'll come in and get it. If he likes something, he'll grab it and he'll take it, brings it back to his shed. All the best stuff, though, he gives to this woman, Adele, I think is her name. He gives to her to, you know, show he appreciates her, to try to impress her. That's a little bit of information we get. And then as he goes to leave, as Luca goes to leave, the woman asks if this is related to the Maroni case. And he's like, I don't know what you're talking about. Well, he then goes and talks to the wife of the man who got decapitated. His name was Umberto Peretti. So he goes to talk to Mrs. Peretti, and you find out that they actually weren't married. It's not a big deal, but she doesn't really know what he did, like what he did for work. He was always kind of coming and going. He'd all of a sudden just have a lot of money. Through the course of the investigation and Luca talking with his boss, and they do some digging, they find out that Umberto Peretti was like an insurance detective. So he would look into cases, and he was looking into this Maroni case. And this Maroni case was from about a year ago. This little girl was kidnapped, and I guess the little girl and her father both went missing, and then they were found dead in a shed next to that swamp. The father was like, I don't remember if they said what he was, but he was wealthy. It's one of those Giallo things. Like, he's like a wealthy industrialist type thing. And you see this through flashbacks that he went to pay the ransom, and then he ended up getting kidnapped himself. And then later they both were found dead. Luca goes back to talk to Peretti's wife, and there's something about a key leading to one of those like security deposit boxes. She goes to open the box to collect whatever is in there. And, you know, this key came from her husband or whatever. And someone in black gloves is stalking her and kills her right as she opens it up and tries to take whatever was in her hand. But there's too many people there, so the person has to flee. Luca shows up, cops show up, and the three witnesses all have like different descriptions. Like, one person says it was like a really tall man, and someone says it was a young man, and someone says no, it was like a balding man, like a bald guy. And it's just like, okay. The article that that the dead woman had pulled from the box is like a child's drawing, and they take it to the little girl Stefania. They take it to her kindergarten teacher, and while Luca is interviewing the teacher, he finds out that the insurance detective Peretti had also talked to her, and we find out that the little girl, even though she couldn't read or write yet, I think she was only like 6 years old or something, she was a really good drawer. And she used to sign, I thought this was actually really cute. This was actually really cool. She signed all of her pictures with like a bent over flower. Like, that was her signature. And I'm like, I like that because it feels real, and it feels like something a kid would do. I feel like a lot of kids probably did do that, but it was just really cool. And so they find all these drawings. The teacher kept all the drawings that she did, and he's looking through them, and they all have this bent flower as her signature. And the piece that they recovered from this security box, they find the area where it fits into this notebook of her drawings, and it's like the day before or the week before she was kidnapped. Luca finds out that she was in the area of that swamp because the drawing that they recovered is a little house, and it's got a weird like drawing of like a rooster on the roof, and then this thing that looks like a hammer. And when like the cops were looking at it, they're like, it looks like a house. It looks like a house on a hill. And then one of them was like, there's something weird on the house. And all of a sudden this jars a flashback where he recalls the house where he talked to the two people overlooking the swamp. And so when he's talking to the teacher about it, she says, the theme that I gave them was draw a place where you would like to live. And so they find out that the little girl with her father, I think, or one of her uncles, was in that area leading up to this. And that's how she saw the place. That's how she saw it and was like, oh, I like that. I want to live there. And she drew it. And then shortly after, Luca realizes that there's something missing. I think there's like part torn off or something, but there's more information that has to be with the drawing that the killer would certainly know about this. And so he realizes, oh my God, we gotta save the teacher. She's probably going to be a target. And they try to call her, but she's not answering because she's not home yet. And they try to get a car to find her. They try to get a patrol car to like go to her place. And then we cut back to her, and she's being followed by someone. She's being stalked by someone in the exact same car that was stalking Paradisi's wife. This person has, again, like black gloves on. She's running. She gets to the front door, and then someone is out at the door, and they stick an umbrella in so she can't close it, and she's fighting with this person. All of a sudden you see this goofy guy who's like, and he's like trying to get in. It was very Argento-esque. It was like the goofy guy in Four Flies, like the mail delivery guy. And it is just, personally, it's like, oh, that's kind of funny, but it's like, I don't know. I also think something like that is just kind of dumb in terms of, so this guy couldn't speak up, like, oh, no, it's me. Like, I'm right behind you, for the sake of, we have to have a little fright in the movie. But she lets him in because it's her neighbor in the building, and she goes in, and I thought this was funny. She goes inside, and within like 15 seconds, she just takes her clothes off and is just fully naked, and we see her tibble tibbies. And then the killer calls her from outside, and she answers the phone. And then the killer like just leaves the phone hanging. And again, I don't know if this is something that is accurate to old phones back then, but because he didn't hang up the phone, the line is busy. So the police can't call her to warn her, even though I'm pretty sure she hung up the phone. Whatever. Well, the killer shows up, and we find out that whoever it is, she clearly knows this person. She recognizes them, and she welcomes them in. And she tells, we come back after like the end of their conversation. We don't know what was said, but she just says something like she doesn't know anything else regarding the drawing, if there was any more information. So the killer, who we're getting their POV a lot, they get up, go into the other room, and there's just a circular saw, and they come back, they chase her a little bit, and we get this brutal kill, amazing kill that I talked about in another video. But it's just like, just cuts her on the leg, and just goes to town on her. You just see blood splatter on the wall. And then we come back, and Luca's investigating more into the murder. They realize that they're looking for, I think we find out that this was how the father was killed, was that like he was hit with like a statue, like a statuette. And so they're looking for a statue that matches it. And then, okay, so this is about halfway through the movie, because that kill is like 45, 50 minutes in. And the movie is about an hour and 40 minutes. So we're about halfway through. And I will say at this point, up to this point, the movie has not given us any suspects. And of course, the killer could be a random person, but it's probably not going to be. It's going to be someone that we meet. And so then the movie starts introducing us to Stefania, the little girl. They start introducing us to her family. Oh, so this is, Luca goes to talk to the family. The mom is crazy at this point. Like she's so messed up. She thinks her little girl is like still around. So she'll be calling her in for supper and be like, "Oh, where's my little angel?" And it's just like, okay, so yeah, she's messed up. We meet one of her uncles, who his name is Oliviero. And I'll say, the moment we meet this guy, it kind of feels like he's the killer. I'm not saying he is or he is not, but it's not that the movie is trying to make us think he is, like, oh, he's super suspicious. It's actually kind of the contrary. It's just the way he's being framed when he's sitting down. It seems like the movie is trying to make us remember him. Like you remember this guy's face. But Luca questions him and questions, I don't remember if it's his wife or if it's another. I'm going to say this. You meet so many people from the family, within a short time that it's a little frustrating. Like I said, the movie does a good job to make sure you remember this guy, but in terms of some of the other men and some of the other women, it's like, oh my god, there's like names are just coming at you. And like I said, I don't remember if this woman was his wife or like one of the other aunts. But anyways, he's interviewing both of them, and what you find out about Oliviero is that during the kidnapping and in the year since, he's been trying to find any information about the kidnappers. So if somebody comes, something, for example, the woman says, she's the one personality trait they gave her is that she just doesn't shut up. She just keeps talking, and she keeps telling Luca stuff about Oliviero, and she just keeps telling him stuff to the point where Oliviero's like, can you stop telling him things? So you learn that Oliviero was kind of jealous of his brother because I think he saved his life. One of the brothers saved the other one back in the war, and like, so Oliviero is missing a hand, and his brother is, became very rich, very successful, has a family, I guess all the things that he doesn't have. And so she basically says, well, he's very jealous of his brother, or he was. And he's just like, why are you telling him this? And then she also reveals that Oliviero had spent a bunch of money a while ago. Somebody had come forward with information that could identify who the kidnappers were. And he paid this guy to find out the information, and then the guy just disappeared. Well, we find out that this guy was Umberto Paradisi. This is where I'm thinking. Now, again, I've seen this movie, but I don't remember all the little details because it's been 2 years. But I'm thinking, okay, he is being set up in terms of, this is the thing I look at for with red herrings for suspects in a Giallo movie is, who are they giving you information on and motive versus who are they like really trying to make you think it's this person. And I'll say this for Oliviero is, the movie is not going out of its way to make you think it's him, but they're certainly giving you information. For example, the thing that, he's jealous of his brother. You're like, okay, well, why do we need to know that? But also that he's been like going out of his way to get all the information on who the killers, who the kidnapper could have been. Well, it could be that he wants to know because he wants to avenge his family. That seems to be the obvious thing. Or hypothetically, if he is the kidnapper, he would want to get rid of any of that information. Just something to think about. But as it goes on, Lucas speaks with more of the family about the aftermath of, the little girl went missing. And by the way, when the flashback scene of seeing the little girl going out to play with the dog and then the mom calling to her and realizing that she's gone, it's shot very well. And it's just kind of funny because like the camera like zooms outside and the dog is like where'd you go? Like the dog doesn't even know. I thought that was funny. Like, animals are a little smarter than that. Like they would be like, oh, she went over there. The person took her that way. Like maybe you could argue that the animal doesn't know that it's a kidnapping. So they're not like thinking anything is out of the ordinary. But it was just funny because the dog is like, Stefania? We meet all these other people, and you see the flashbacks of when they were told to bring this ransom and when the father went, and then it looked like he got jumped. Luca's talking to this person, and he's talking to that person, and all of a sudden he's talking to, I think this guy is another uncle. It seems like the movie, if the movie is going to at least give you one red herring, like a legitimate person that they want you to be suspicious of, it's this guy. And it's because he's like asking him, oh, did you ever take Stefania places? And he's like, oh, yes. I love taking her places. Oh, did you go to like the zoo, go out to like, like nature? Like, oh, yes. Anything I could to take her away from her family because her family situation wasn't good. And like the parents were always fighting and they were about to separate and her father really wanted her. But the mom was going to make him spend, like basically give her a bunch of money if that was ever going to happen. Anyways, it got to the point where she ended up getting kidnapped. And so we get this moment, which is funny enough, comes up on Wikipedia as controversy. This scene, I'm going to say, is like definitely a trigger warning for many people I know will not want to watch this movie because of this 20 seconds. I'm going to try to warn you in, again, the cleanest way I can. You can also just look up the movie on Wikipedia and scroll down to the part that says controversy. But yeah, I remembered seeing this, but I forgot that it was in this movie. But I remembered it was in a Giallo I watched back in early 2023. And I remember being like, how the fuck did that ever get allowed? How the fuck did that ever get past censors or anything? And I just assumed, well, it's a European movie. They obviously don't care, especially in 1972. But yeah, so he's talking to this guy. Gosh, how do I even say this? If you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. And some people might even be like, it's not that big of a deal, but it's certainly a jarring thing to see in a modern context. But you hear a little girl, and they look over, and this girl walks in, and there's not a stitch on her. And he's just like, oh, no, like, not now, like, later. And the girl turns around and runs away. Luca is looking at this guy like, what the fuck? And he's like, she's a model. Like I swear, there's no funny business. Well, he keeps interviewing him and gets whatever information he needs and goes to leave. And then it's this shot where he's, the man is like looking out the window as Luca is going, and you see Luca walking away, and there's a little girl like jump roping, and he stops and like looks at the little girl, and then he looks up at the window like, you shouldn't be anywhere near children. Yeah. So Luca then investigates the shack where Stefania and her father were found dead. Again, it's amazing how this is shot. Like you see the old chalk marks on the ground, and you find out that in the investigation initially, I think the father was beaten to death, but the little girl was left to die, and she died of starvation. And the only evidence they find is a rusted nail that's shiny on the end. And Luca, being the great detective he is, figures out this nail must have been used to hold something on the wall, like a picture or something. So like the shiny bit is the piece that was embedded in the wall, and the rusted bit is the part that was exposed to open air for a period of time. And then he takes something, I don't remember what it is. It's rounded. I'd say it's like a rock, but there's no way it's not a rock. But there's like these thin windows at the top of the building, and he kind of like gets up and he just kind of throws the thing out, and it starts rolling down the hill and landing in the reeds of the swamp. And so he figures out, okay, whatever that nail was holding up, the little girl must have inscribed a clue onto it and thrown it out the window. And he tells this to the family that are staying outside, and which I think is kind of funny, because it's like, he obviously doesn't know, and we're not supposed to know. But like I said, the movie hasn't introduced us to anybody outside of the family. So it's got to be someone in the family who did this. And he's literally telling them that there's got to be a piece of crucial evidence out there floating around. And he then realizes, like, later, I feel like I just challenged the killer, and I shouldn't have done that. It's like, well, yeah, no shit, because now they're going to actually be on the hunt for some bit of evidence. And okay, so this is another thing that I thought was a little odd, kind of like the thing with the telephone. Through these series of flashbacks, we would see like the little girl and the dad in this shed, and the shed is not too far away from the other shed where the guy who just kind of collects junk out from the swamp. They're totally visible to each other and arguably within earshot. So it's kind of like, why did they never call for help? Maybe they did. I don't know. It's just another one of those things where I kind of thought that kind of seems like a logical plot hole. Well, next thing happens is the guy who lived in the shed, he gets killed. He gets beaten with a statue, and Luca finds scribed on his wall, like, if you ever want a good time, to call me Adele, the woman who had mentioned the Moroni case. And I don't remember exactly how, but he realizes that it must have been the item on the wall that was thrown out must have been a mirror. And he figures out, oh my God, the killer is going to be going after her, because she probably has the mirror, because the guy, what's his name? Mattia, I think is the guy's name, Mattia. He would always give her, Adele, all the best stuff he found. And the killer obviously came by his place looking for it, but it's not there because he gave it to Adele. So Luca tries to call her, tries to warn her. And like, as he's on the phone, the killer shows up, and she does a good enough job of locking this killer out, but they break in, but, and they approach her. They start cutting her with a razor, but before they can finish the job, Luca shows up, and the killer is forced to escape, and Luca has the evidence he needs. And then we get to the finale. I won't spoil this, but I have basically told you the vast majority of the plot. But he has the whole family there, and again, like I said, at a point there's just way too much family members that we all met all at once. And he gives this big speech, which I found out George Hilton had to learn that whole speech, I think, like in English, because they were recording everything. They were filming everything in English, and there were like rewrites done. And I think he had to learn that whole monologue in less than 30 minutes, which as an actor, that is insane. That is crazy. So like, you know, it shows that George Hilton is like is a professional. But he gives this speech talking to them, and he's holding the mirror, and he's telling them that the evidence is on the back of this. And he goes and he shines the mirror in front of everybody's face and has them all look at themselves. And then he goes to Beniamino, who I think was the pedo, and he flips the mirror, showing him what it is, and the guy's like, ah! Lights go out and come back on. Chaos is controlled. We find out who the killer is. I won't say who, but it's easily one of two people. But what I will say is, this is that deep red thing. Stefania could not read or write yet. She was too young, but she was a good drawer. She drew a picture of the kidnapper on the back of the mirror and signed it with the flower. This image, like, again, in deep red, you have the thing with the drawing on the wall, and he's like breaking off the new wall and revealing the old wall with the drawing on it. And it's a great sequence with great music, and it's filmed so well and everything, and it looks really cool. I gotta say, the simplicity of how and again, so they're not the same thing, but they're very similar. They're both similar in terms of a kid drew this, and this reveals who the killer is. I gotta say, I think I prefer My Dear Killer, because there's something so, I don't know, so simple in how it's done. It's not too over the top, and I just love that. I love how it was like the reveal, and then the movie ends right there, right when we find out who it is and we see what the drawing is. Fine, it's over. So yeah, I've already spoken too much, and I'm sorry if I kind of spoiled the movie for you, but I mean, I didn't tell you the ending, like who the killer is. But yes, check out My Dear Killer. By the time you'd be watching this, the overview will already be up for it. I actually haven't written the overview. I decided I'm going to start actually doing these unscripted movie reviews before I then write the overview, just so the movie can be fresh in my head. I can add any thoughts I have about it, and then rewatch the movie again while writing the script for the Jolly Tally. So if you're watching this as the video is coming out, the Jolly Tally is yet to come out, but the overview already has. But yeah, I would definitely recommend this movie. I don't know if this would go into my top Giallo film list. It probably would. I don't know about top 5, but top 10, definitely, maybe. Maybe. Like, here's the thing about the movie. It's not overly stylish. It doesn't have a lot of the style that a lot of people expect with Giallo films, but it makes up for it in just having a solid story. And sure, the story is not perfect. Like I said, there are a few plot holes. There are a few things where you're like, how does that actually make sense? Or like, wait, why didn't this just happen? And then also in terms of the list of suspects, it's not a big list of people. They, at one point, as I said, they throw out a bunch of family members at you, but they really only are really kind of making it seem like it's one of two people. A third guy was kind of aggressive with Luca at one point because he was investigating. He was like, the killer's going to come after you next. But again, I feel like that line was just thrown in there, so we might also think it might be that guy too. But yeah, so that's really the only shortcoming that the movie has is there's just not more red herrings. But that's fine. The movie is already an hour and 40 minutes, which for a Giallo film, I feel like you're kind of pushing it. It's not too long, but once you go past an hour 40, it is really kind of like, okay, you need to start wrapping this up. But yes, solid movie, great entry, great film from a director who did not do a lot of Giallo films. I don't even know how many he did. I think this is his only one. But he was a dialogue director on Fistful of Dollars, and he was an assistant director on For a Few Dollars More. That is insane. Oh, and he also directed My Name is Nobody. That's amazing. Yeah, this guy is way more of a spaghetti western type director. But anyways, I'm going to wrap this up. I highly recommend this movie. If you don't like it, if it's too slow or whatever, I can understand that. But I think this Giallo movie has a little bit of everything. I think you'll like this movie if you like Deep Red. I think you'll like this movie if you like The House with the Laughing Windows. There's a little bit of similarities there. It also kind of reminded me a little bit of Bazzani, so like a little bit of The Fifth Chord kind of reminded me of Sergio Martino's type stuff. The brutality in those murders, especially the first two. No, the first and the third, the decapitation and the circular saw. That stuff reminds me of Fulci. Yeah, it's just a solid movie, and I would call this movie, in terms of Giallo films, a deep cut, because you really have to be a Giallo fan to find this one. Kind of like The Fifth Chord, but a little bit more kind of like The Fifth Chord, but even deeper cut. I'll finish here. Thank you for listening to me ramble, get this far. Have you seen My Dear Killer? What are your thoughts on this movie? Have you not heard about it? And have you not seen it, but you're curious? Had you not heard about this movie until I talked about it, or what? Any thoughts you got on the movie, let me know. Questions, thoughts, curiosities, or concerns, leave them down below. I'll get back to you. And yeah. Anyways, stay tuned for the Jolly Tally for My Dear Killer. Oh, I guess I can give a prediction for the score. I'll probably say between 550 and 600 points. But yeah, anyways, that is all I've got to say. And if I got anything else, I'll try and throw it in the Jolly Tally video. But thank you for watching. And this is Tanner Leeser for The King in Giallo. And welcome back to the Jolly Tally season. I hope we have a good 2025 with the years 1972 and 1973.
Chi sei? Chi ti conosce? Ma io sono Papà! Ma fame! Io sono una povera cristiana, da fame!